So, okay, I want to know how are you guys doing? What are you doing? Projects and
Doing good. We're doing good.
we're,
I started my pension this year.
oh, wow.
I turned 65 in December, and I started my pension in January quite coincidentally,
Uh-huh.
and that has helped us.
Fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah,
well, that good timing.
yeah, yeah.
And Patrice, what about you? Do you have projects over?
I'm working on one right. A few I've been working on.
Mm.
One is I wrote a bass clarinet concerto for Ralph.
Well, that was
Orchestra.
some years ago. We recorded it. It's called the Edda Bass Clarinet Concerto after the Poetic Edda.
Okay.
And
Wow.
it's a bass clarinet concerto. It's actually we have recorded it. It's on a record called Too Eclectic. TOO. Too.
But also too.
Yeah, but also Too
But the
Eclectic.
first album was called Eclectic, so the second one was
Yeah.
It's
Two
too. I
Eclectic.
love it.
Did 5 albums together
Um,
in this studio here.
so
Yeah.
Patrice, tell me then, like, what's your jumping off point for a bass clarinet concerto?
Well, did you write the concerto? And I go, oh, no problem.
That was all you needed.
Yeah, it was one of those things. That
I actually said it like this. Please.
I'll go begging you
Right.
all the way. I had some idea. I had written a piece called Ragnarok. And
Okay.
so that was kind of like the jumping off place. He loves Norse mythology, so it was a matter of just combining that first movie and then making two more to go with it. So the first one is Asgard, which is the city of the god, and then Yggdrasil is the tree of life, and that's the middle movement. And the last movement is Ragnarok, which is the end of the time.
End of the world,
End
which
of the
is
world.
kind of appropriate right now, and I hope not.
So it's kind of programmatic as well.
And no quotes from Wagner.
No.
No, it's not. No,
My
music
original
really
quote.
isn't like that. It's not Wagnerian. It's a beautiful. I got to tell you, Brett, it's a beautiful piece. I
No, I
mean,
can't wait to hear it.
it's kind of amazing that because there are bass clarinet concertos, but even though they're interesting and mostly to bass clarinet players, they're they're not necessarily the great, real inspiring music possibly.
Right.
And this is a very, very inspiring piece of music. Plus,
Oh, this is fantastic. I can't wait to hear it.
bass clarinet quite well. So,
And Patrice, what's your instrument?
I played bassoon.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. All right, so Ralph, I want to hear about your history with the Pasadena Symphony and.
well, I started playing with them in 1978.
Oh, wow.
Patrice and I graduated from CSUN over California State University in North
I went to CSUN too.
Did you really?
For viola, yeah, in the 90s.
Wow. Who was the viola teacher?
Pam Goldsmith.
Oh, Pam Bolson.
Oh,
Wow. I used to work with Pam.
yeah.
I do recording work, or I used to. I don't know if anybody's doing any work right now.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Anyways, we graduated in 77, and Therese went to Europe for a while and lived in Salzburg and studied at the Mozarteum there.
Oh, wow.
And I stayed here, and I started working with the Pasadena Symphony in 1978
Wow.
as a son. And it was funny. I've told very few people this story. The first time I played bass clarinet with them, Daniel Lewis was the conductor.
Hmm.
And they used to have Sunday morning rehearsals. And we had a rehearsal, and we were doing the Rachmaninoff symphonic dances. And Dan Lewis called me that night at home. I was still living with my folks in Reseda. And he called me, and he said, I want you to be our bass clarinet player. And I said, well, you have a guy, right? There's a guy already playing, subbing for you. And so I can't say yes to you, but please, in the future, I'd be happy to sub, with the orchestra. Well, what happened is eventually they let the guy go.
Mm.
And they hired me in 1980, which was the year we got married.
Wow.
So it's this season coming up, it'll be 40 years.
Well, that's a refreshing story that you're noble and, you have character. Because most people would have said, get rid of him. So how has the orchestra and just music in LA in general changed since then?
I think that everything's gotten a little bit softer, maybe a little more refined. When I started out doing recording work, and I started doing recording work in 1978, it was analog, right? Not digital. And the thing about analog, it was more about, can you get on tape? I mean, I remember back then it was more about, we can't hear you, can you play louder? Back then, the request was more often, can you play louder?
Yeah, now it's, can you play softer?
Now it's far more, can you please play softer? And it's like kind of not a good thing if they have to say to you, could you play a little softer? I do get that. And it just seems like in the analog era, it was more about, can you get on the tape? Until things were louder. Also, it affected the way pitch is approached, because I think that some of the greatest players back then, they played a little on the high side. It was almost like that would help you just a little. I'm talking very little sharp. You could get on tape a little bit better, maybe. And what happened was with the digital thing, and also with pre-records, because normally pre-records are right down on 440. I mean, they feel lower than that. They're so unflexibly down on 440. That tuning has changed. I think the best players now, instead of coming from a little above and going down, they come up, because when you play sharp to pre-records, it really I've noticed, it really sounds bad. Being sharp to pre-record tracks really sounds bad. It almost works if you're slightly lower coming up to it. At least that's my feeling about it.
That makes sense. I'm always amazed at how soft you're all asked to play. And then it's like a lot softer and softer.
In fact, I remember once a great colleague of mine, Gary Bovier, great clarinet player, we've done a lot of stuff together. We were doing a thing at Fox Studio, and the composer was Bill Ross, who's a great guy. Just one of the good guys. And we were reminiscing about a time when we were at Fox Studios with the particular sound engineer, great sound. And the request was, can you please play louder? We can't get you on tape. They said, they're saying that to us. And now here we are some years later, same sound engineer.
Can you play softer?
Bill's saying it's just not soft enough. Just play softer and softer. So the red light goes on. We're waiting for the take to start. And Gary turns to me and goes, remember when they used to tell us to play a lot louder? I was kind of wishing we were back in those days. Because we just, we got it. But it was hard to play it that soft.
And why is that? I mean, is it the nature of the digital media?
I think that's... Yeah. I'm not an expert on the subject, but I would say the digital definitely. Oh, yeah.
Or it's because you can boost things, but you can't really subtract, right?
I guess, yeah. Yeah. Right. I'm like, Patrice knows much more about the recording process than I do. But,
well, string players, too, sometimes we get requests to play inhumanly soft. And I think, well, at this point, why do you even want us here?
Well, I know.
Wait, Ralph, tell me, what is the evolution from in these wind instruments or clarinet, from clarinet to specializing in one of a specific?
Well, I don't consider myself a specialist on the bass clarinet, although I think a lot of my colleagues consider me that. I consider myself a clarinetist first and foremost, but in Los Angeles, that means you go both ways. That means you go up, you can go up to the little E flat clarinet and the D clarinet. And you can go down to the bass clarinet, the basset horn, and there are two contrabass clarinets. So it really means that you have to try and be as good as you can be on all those instruments. So I just let my employers
pick for you
what they want here, and a lot of times it's the bass clarinet. But I played first clarinet with some orchestra, the Opera Pacific Orchestra, I would say. first clarinet player for 16 years. So I can do that, and I feel I do it well. But but I did get serious about bass clarinet early on. I did get very serious about it. And it was a situation where I didn't play it in college. I'll try and make this short, not too long-winded.
No, it's good.
And I am trying to get to the answer. The answer is, when I got out of college, my teacher in college was Dominic Farah, and Dominic was the first clarinet of the Pasadena Symphony in those days. And he said, he was an old Italian guy. He said, Ralph, you're going to have to play the bass clarinet. And I got one for you. He had bought a bass clarinet for me.
Oh, wow.
Of course, I had to buy it from him, but he had bought it. It's an interesting horn, and I'll tell you about it. Anyways, so he lived in Woodland Hills at the time, and he said, I want you to come over and try it. So I go over there, and I go in, and I sit down on the couch, and he's holding it, and he's explaining, he's telling me a little bit about it. And then he started playing. And I'm listening to Dominic. I mean, Dominic was a great clarinet player, and he was a great bass clarinet player. So I'm listening to him. I'm thinking to myself, because I played a little bass clarinet in college, but not well, and most of us did not play it well in college. We played because we had to sometimes, and the instrument was in dreadful condition. It was a school horn, you know. And I'm listening to Dominic play the bass clarinet, and I'm like, that's how it sounds? That's how that's supposed to sound? God, I got to get me that thing. So I bought it, and I fell in love with it. And I, it's the only one I ever owned. Now, an interesting thing about it, when I bought it, it didn't go down. Tell me if I'm getting too long-winded about anything.
This is good.
Okay. It went down to the concert D flat, the low written E flat.
Right.
Okay.
But you want the C.
Below the stab. Yeah. And I didn't know anything about the bass clarinet. I didn't know the repertoire. I didn't know a thing about it. But I did know that you were better off having that low C, right? The low concert B flat. So there was an old timer by the name of Glenn Johnston, a really nice guy, great. He had been a freelance clarinet player in his day, and he was retired, an old Southerner. He kind of talked like this, Ralph, I don't know about that modern music. I just don't. He could play Yankee Doodle in the middle, and nobody would notice. He was very conservative. He was a funny guy. He only had one leg. One leg had been shot off in a hunting accident.
Oh my God!
Which makes this next part really funny. So I had heard he could put an extension on the bass clarinet. So I said, Glenn, I need a low C. And he was very nice. We hit it off right away. I said, I need a low C. He had a box full of extensions. Some were down to D, some were down to D flat. One was long enough to go down to low C. So I said, that's the one I want. And so we put it on. He Jimmy rigged it. We tried it out. It seemed to work okay. I left the horn with him. It took him a while, but he put it on, made it permanent, and it's still on there.
Oh, wow.
It's still on there. But the funny thing about it is, and I didn't know he was going to do this when I came to get the horn. There was, you put the keyboard for those horns on the right thumb, mostly. Okay. You can also rig them up for the little fingers, but they're on the thumb. Well, he had the low D on the thumb, but the D flat and the C were on the feet. You had to operate them with your feet. You had these metal triggers coming from the key, and you would hit it with your foot. And I'm thinking to myself,
well, how is he going to do that?
No, I'm thinking, why would you think of this? I didn't say this, but I'm thinking, you only got one leg. How would you think of this? So I played it that way for a few years, and then I found a repair guy, Tom Ye, who I think still works in town. I used other people, but at the time I went to him, and he mechanized it, so it is fully mechanized.
Oh my God!
But here's the great thing: when I was at Glenn's and we were just talking, he was working on the horn, and we were just talking because he did other repair work for him. He was with the original owner when he bought the instrument. in 1933.
Wow.
And this guy's name was Pee Wee Emerson. And he played in the contract orchestra at MGM.
Wow. So the horn came full circle.
The horn was his horn at MGM for years and years.
That's unbelievable.
And then he thought, when the contract orchestras went under, my understanding is he couldn't get any work. So the horn may have sat for a while, but Dominic bought it from Pee Wee's widow. When Pee Wee died, he bought it from his widow. And then he sold it to me in 1977.
Wow.
So I've had the horn. It's a great horn. I mean, it really is a wonderful horn.
And this is your main instrument? This is the horn you use?
That's the only bass clarinet I've ever owned.
Wow. So do you two have a project you're going to work on during this wonderful quarantine we're all in?
Yeah, she is writing some music right now.
Oh, fantastic. And are you going to collaborate on something?
A couple of them.
What was that?
Are you going to collaborate on a project?
No, mostly I do the writing and he does playing. And then friends, an oboe and a flute player I'm going to add on to.
Oh, nice.
I made an arrangement of Clair de Lune for 2 clarinets, an orchestra, and harp.
Oh, wow.
We recorded that. And then I made an arrangement of the prelude from the
La Tumba, the Cooper.
Right. So that's for oboe, clarinet, strings, and harp.
We haven't recorded that yet.
But
that'll be beautiful.
But she played the software for me. It sounds great.
Then I have some original compositions that will be on there.
Fantastic. Okay, so you guys are busy, and this is
yeah, we're trying. The 4th album that we made is called Reflecting Ponds, and the title piece is a piece that Patrice wrote that I play clarinet on, and it's a really beautiful piece. So we came up with this fairy tale called The Water Horse and the Fairy, and it's about a water horse that when it was young, like the Loch Ness monster, a benign version of a water horse, and it grows up. When it's young, it's protected by this fairy, and it grows up with the fairy, and they're just fast friends. They love each other, but because they're so different, it's hard to be together. So it's a little story about their quest to be more like each other, and they end up at the. Can I say the end without spoiling the story? At the end, they end up. They're both swans.
Oh.
You know how swans mate for life. So at the end, they end up. They're both swans, and the music that runs through it is Patrice's Reflecting Pond.
Oh, wow.
Recording of that, and it's really beautiful. It's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, so what an uplifting story and timely. We need that story now.
And it is an original story. Of course, the pictures that we put to her Edda concerto, that's all mythological. Eclectic is the first album. Too Eclectic is the second album. Soundscapes is the 3rd album, and that's entirely clarinet and bass clarinet alone.
Wow.
And one piece by Patrice on there called Midnight at Stonehenge. And the 4th album is Reflecting Ponds, and the 5th album is called Capriccio, and it features our reed trio that when we were young, we had a reed trio called the Whirling Winds Trio. He played bassoon, I played clarinet, and a colleague of ours, Gordon Lazarus, played oboe. And we always wanted to make a recording, but we're talking, 30 to 40 years ago. So we didn't make a recording back then. So we made a recording a few years ago, to kind of resurrect our old...
Wonderful.
Our old reed trio. The Whirling Winds Trio, it was called.
You two are like quite a creative team. This is incredible.
Well, thanks, Brett. Yeah, well, we try to remain creative. Work is great, but you don't get a chance to necessarily do all the stuff that you want to do.
Right.
You asked about the symphony, how it's changed with you. The only thing I'll say is that the standards of that orchestra have never dropped. When I joined it or first started playing with it, the standard of the orchestra was extremely high, and that has not, if anything, maybe gone high.
Well, you know, while I'm doing the episodes, David and I are listening to some of the concerts from last season, and the orchestra sounds incredible.
I know.
I mean, just incredible.
It is. It is an amazing orchestra.
Was there anything last season? I've been asking people, like, was there a moment in any of the concerts, like big bass clarinet solo?
There was for me personally.
Oh,
most people don't know this, unless you're a bass. We all know that Mahler intros are like Beethoven intros. They're really hard, especially for the conductor. And of course, David did a great job. But what most people don't know, and what I didn't know most of my career, is that the bass clarinet part is really hard to play right in the intro to the first movement of the Mahler Titan, the First Symphony. And that's the whole thing about bass clarinet for me is I mean, God knows how I played some of those bass clarinet parts when I was young. It took a long time to go, oh yeah, this is hard to do right. And in the meantime, you've done like 30 performances of it. Suddenly you go, oh, I wasn't playing this right all this time. And sometimes you'll run into a conductor who is not impressed with the fact that you've played it a million times, and they're like, no, you're not playing this right. No, that's not what happened here. Dave was real good about it. But it's hard. I mean, the bass clarinet part, there's a little fanfare in the beginning with the two clarinets. It's very hard to play right on the bass clarinet. Well, as you know, we do two performances, and when I knew that the Titan was coming up, I really worked on that intro. It's not a chop thing. It's not chops. It's getting the right sound and articulations. It's really hard to do. And so we had two performances. I wasn't all that happy with the rehearsals. The first performance was okay, but at the night performance, I really got it. And I remember that that Dave, and this is really something because he's got a million things to worry about, he did kind of give me a look, and he kind of smiled at me for just a minute before he went on to the next challenge. And I thought, wow, that's great. So he liked it too. And moreover, he actually took just a split second to let me know it was all right. It was right.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for talking with me.
You're welcome.
Oh, it was our pleasure, Brett.